Good morning and thank you for joining us here on Live Impact News on 13 News Now Plus. My name is Eugene Daniel, joined in studio right now with producer Sarah Calloway and our special guest today. We have Dr. Jesse Richman from Old Dominion University, our political expert this morning. And I tell you what, we have a lot to talk about after we have witnessed the longest State of the Union address that was given by President Donald Trump last night. This a very pivotal, key speech that he needed to give as we're months away from those midterm elections. We're going to get right into things this morning and talk about that address and then also the rebuttal given by Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger directly following. Okay, first off, I got to welcome our guest this morning. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Great to be here as always.
Before we start and listen to some of the clips that we have pulled from last night's speech, again, a record breaker, we kind of figured it was going to be long. House Speaker Mike Johnson said it earlier in the day that tonight is going to be long, and for him to say it and for the president to say it, you knew it was likely going to break a record. But before we get into some sound bites, after watching last night from the president, initial thoughts?
Well, this was a very long speech, and they threw everything in the kitchen sink into it. Let's not just have one World War II veteran who's 100 years old. Let's have two. Let's not just have one medal pinning. Let's have several. This was every idea they had about how to have a speech that would connect with the American people and move the needle maybe on approval rating and so forth went into this speech, and then they doubled it.
And, it's interesting that you bring that up, in talking about the USA hockey team and the other people that we had that were honored last night. You could tell that they were really trying to pin in on some of the things that you would imagine Americans could feel more patriotic about, fueling that into the speech. But what I also want to get into now is some of the more policy-related things that the president discussed last night. We're going to start first here with, this was at the very beginning of the president's speech. He went through what he says have been the accomplishments of this second term as president after his first year. Let's take a listen to it. It's about 5 minutes.
Thank you. Today our border is secure, our spirit is restored, inflation is plummeting, incomes are rising fast, the roaring economy is roaring like never before, and our enemies are scared, our military and police are stacked, and America is respected again, perhaps like never before. After 4 years in which millions and millions of illegal aliens poured across our borders, totally unvetted and unchecked, we now have the strongest and most secure border in American history by far. In the past 9 months, 0 illegal aliens have been admitted to the United States. But we will always allow people to come in legally, people that will love our country and will work hard to maintain our country. The flow of deadly fentanyl across our border is down by a record 56% in 1 year. And last year, the murder rate saw its single largest decline in recorded history. This is the biggest decline, think of it, in recorded history, the lowest number in over 1 125 years, year 1900. In fact, substantially before my wonderful father, I had a wonderful father, Fred, before he was born, substantially before he was born. That's a long time ago. He wouldn't like me to say that, but that's a long time ago. The Biden administration and its allies in Congress gave us the worst inflation in the history of our country. But in 12 months, my administration has driven core inflation down to the lowest level in more than 5 years. And in the last 3 months of 2025, it was down to 1.7%. Gasoline, which reached a peak of over $6 a gallon in some states under my predecessor, it was quite honestly a disaster, is now below $2.30 a gallon in most states, and in some places $1.99 a gallon. And when I visited the great state of Iowa just a few weeks ago, I even saw $1.85 a gallon for gasoline. Mortgage rates are the lowest in 4 years and falling fast, and the annual cost of a typical new mortgage is down almost $5,000 just since I took office. 1 year. And low interest rates will solve the Biden-created housing problem well, at the same time protecting the values of those people who already own a house that really feel rich for the first time in their lives. We want to protect those values. We want to keep those values up. We're going to do both. And we are going to keep it that way. The stock market has set 53 all-time record highs since the election. Think of that, 1 year. Boosting pensions, 401ks, and retirement accounts for the millions and millions of Americans. Are all gaining. Everybody's up, way up. In 4 long years, the last administration got less than $1 trillion in new investment in the United States. And when I say less, substantially less. In 12 months, I secured commitments for more than $18 trillion pouring in from all over the globe. Think of it, much less than $1 trillion for 4 years versus much more than $18 trillion for 1 year. What a difference a president makes.
A lot that the president said there, but really painting a quite rosy picture of the United States. Again, we have our guest this morning, Dr. Jesse Richman, here from Old Dominion University. I want to start with his thoughts on the economy. One thing that I noted is that, again, the picture that the president paints in a way kind of ignores what we're seeing from recent polling. I want to read a few results that we have from polls. This is an AP poll that says 39% of U.S. adults approve of how the president has been handling the economy. A Fox News poll shows 59% disapproving of the economy. That is the latest one that was compiled just last month and then also released in the last few days ahead of this speech. What were your thoughts from the president's depiction of the economy in his speech last night?
Yeah, so Trump faces a similar problem to what Biden thought he was facing through much of his administration, which is that in the president's mind, the economy is doing really well, and it's the result of the administration's policies, but the American public isn't really buying it. And so Trump's approval numbers on the economy have been quite low for some time. Concerns about affordability persist. Spanberger referenced those extensively in her response, for example. And so, Trump's trying to push back on that. He's trying to set a different narrative. The economic statistics cited are ones that look the best, right? So more Americans are working than any other time. Yes. On the other hand, the unemployment rate's ticked up a little bit since Trump took office, for example. And so, it's in politics, quite often politicians will say things that are not factually untrue, not entirely at least, but there's more context to fill in the picture. And so the impression from within the White House can often be more rosy than the impression in the public, because the public's looking at the whole picture, not just kind of what's on the curated selection of good numbers talking points. But we got to run through of the good number talking points.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm looking at factcheck.org as well, because you heard the president there say that they inherited a stagnant economy with inflation at record levels, and you mentioned the struggle that Joe Biden had in communicating his message and what was happening versus how Americans were feeling. But looking at the numbers from that, annual growth in real GDP was 2.5% or higher each year under the former President Biden, and annual inflation rate was down to 3% from its peak of 9.1 when Trump had taken office as well. And so it's interesting, like you said, there are certain numbers that can be used in the message. Clearly he wanted to paint a more positive message for the American people to kind of bring this in. He also talked about gas prices too.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting to me, just because that's such a specific, number to put out, and I know a lot of people are probably looking around like, where's that number at?
Where's that $1.80 gas?
Yeah.
BBC fact checkers did some searching. They found there are 4 gas stations in the U.S. that have under $2 gas. So if you look really, really hard,
you can find it.
Really hard. So the average is much higher than that. But it's, again, sort of what numbers do you focus on? Biden, the GDP growth looked pretty good. On the other hand, real median incomes across the Biden years, the overall picture wasn't good because of the inflation eating into people's incomes. And so, what are people focusing on versus what does a politician wish they were focusing on in hopes that this will generate political support? And I think we've seen both Trump and Biden struggle with that a bit, where voters remain dissatisfied with the state of the economy across administrations, dissatisfied with inflation rates and so forth. And Biden and now Trump think they ought to get more credit for things being good than voters are given.
Well, let's talk about tariffs now, because a part of the big conversation about the economy has been tariffs, particularly how the president has utilized tariffs. We know just within the last few days, the Supreme Court has weighed in, and they ruled that the way that the president has been issuing certain tariffs on goods are unconstitutional, saying that he cannot use his Emergency Powers Act to initiate these long-standing tariffs on goods. That is the role of Congress. The president spoke about tariffs last night as well, with several Supreme Court justices in attendance last night. Let's hear what the president had to say.
Knowing that the legal power that I, as president, have to make a new deal could be far worse for them, and therefore they will continue to work along the same successful path that we had negotiated before the Supreme Court's unfortunate involvement. So despite the disappointing ruling, these powerful, country-saving, it's saving our country, the kind of money we're taking in.
He called the Supreme Court ruling unfortunate, their involvement unfortunate, which actually is a scale back from what he called it earlier in the week, saying that he was deeply disappointed, and saying that he was ashamed, and that the Supreme Court justices, he called some of them unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution. That ruling passed 6-3, by the way, in that. Jesse, let me ask you first off, what are your reactions to the president's response kind of seemingly softening a bit during last night's speech versus what he said a few days ago?
Well, it's possible that he claimed in the speech that with alternative approaches and so forth, he's been able to maintain similar leverage towards negotiations. Mm-hmm. So it's possible that his own view has shifted a little bit in the sense that he thinks he's still got enough leverage to accomplish what he wants to accomplish on trade, absent the NAIPA powers that the Supreme Court said he could not use in the way he'd been using them.
Yeah, because he came out the next day and said, we're going to issue 10% tariffs now, saying that there are other legal matters that he can do it, and then up to 15, that there are other legal matters he can. And to that point, I guess I should say the Supreme Court ruling again only talks about those that he used with the Emergency Powers Act. There are still other avenues that seemingly they could use.
Right. There are other avenues. They don't give him quite as much flexibility as he was claiming he had under NAIPA, where he was imposing tariffs of any magnitude at will. These are more restricted. There's a time limit, and so forth. So, he clearly remains unhappy with the Supreme Court decision, but it's also clear that to the extent he's able to prevent this from altering his course on trade policy, he's going to stay the course on trade policy.
Because give us a indication in your words, this has been a major part of his not just economic policy, but how he has been able to negotiate and to govern and interacting with other countries. I mean, we were looking at that Supreme Court ruling, and still in many ways are, as a major hit to the way in which the Trump administration has conducted business on this second round of him being within the presidency. I didn't get to talk to you the other day when this happened, but when that ruling came down, did you see it as oh man, they're really going to have to figure out how they're going to move forward? How did you kind of view that ruling in and of itself?
Well, it was a major blow to Trump's trade policy. I think that there's no doubt about that. He's was leveraging the NAIPA powers to set trade policy unilaterally, and under the Supreme Court's ruling, this is part of a project by some members of the court. I think there were really three factions of the court involved in this decision. On the one hand, you had the three Democratic-appointed members of the court who did not want to see Trump succeed on this. But they were broadly in favor of an expansive read of presidential powers. Then you had Roberts and the two other members of the Republican-appointed, typically more conservative bloc on the court, who saw this as an opportunity to continue a line of jurisprudence they've been pursuing around restricting the extent to which Congress can delegate broad powers to the president. So they used the same doctrine to overturn Biden's effort to put in place major changes to federal student loan policy unilaterally. Major questions, in the view of Roberts, need to be dealt with by Congress. They can't be delegated to the extent that Congress sometimes has, or the presidents assert Congress has, to the executive branch. Congress has to act. And then there were three members of the Republican-appointed group who, and Kavanaugh argued that because it's a foreign policy issue, this major powers doctrine doesn't apply in this case, wanted to give the president a leeway on this policy, even as in some other areas they might like to restrict the president. And so these three factions, I think this is why it took the court a long time to come out with its ruling, because there was a process of negotiation and response between these different groups on the court.
You know, it's we got to take a quick break here in a bit, but before we do that, just again going over this Fox News poll, with 37% of those who were polled approved when it came to tariffs specifically. So there has been a lot of conversation amongst just average day Americans about tariffs and who is impacted the most by this. Just looking at some of the recent numbers, researchers say with that ruling by SCOTUS that they estimate about $175 billion that have been collected through the tariff so far would fall under this Emergency Powers Act. The reason why that's significant, because now you have companies like Costco that have said they are suing. I believe FedEx as well. They are wanting to sue to try to get their money back, and money that they've had to put out there for that. And so interesting to see where that goes forward, because right now, will those companies get money back? And then ultimately we know that it's consumers that have to kind of put that in there. We will see. We have much more to discuss here. We're going to take a quick break and continue looking through last night's historic State of the Union address. And then we're going to get to as well the rebuttal by our own governor here in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger. Thank you for staying with us here on Live Impact News. If you're watching us live on YouTube, we certainly appreciate it, but I want to make sure that you know that you can always watch us by downloading our streaming app, 13 News Now Plus. You can get it on your TV on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. So much more programming besides this live stream that we have that is exclusive to that app, and we'd love if you would download it. But again, thank you for watching if you're joining us right now. We are talking about the reaction from last night's State of the Union address, the longest now in recorded modern history by President Trump, and we've been going through various things that he said within that hour and 48-minute speech last night to his colleagues in the House and Senate. Joining us this morning, Dr. Jesse Richman here from Old Dominion University, political expert. And now I want to talk about the president's comments on Iran, if we can briefly. The president talking about the situation that has been unfolding there with that country, including we have even one of our own ships here, the Gerald R. Ford, USS Gerald R. Ford, that has been moved closer into that region. So certainly impacting us here in Hampton Roads from a naval standpoint. Let's listen to what the president had to say about this last night.
As president, I will make peace wherever I can, but I will never hesitate to confront threats to America wherever we must. That's why in a breakthrough operation last June, the United States military obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons program with an attack on Iranian soil known as Operation Midnight Hammer. For decades, it had been the policy of the United States never to allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. Many decades. Since they seized control of that proud nation 47 years ago, the regime and its murderous proxies have spread nothing but terrorism and death and hate. They've killed and maimed thousands of American service members and hundreds of thousands and even millions of people with what's called roadside bombs. They were the kings of the roadside bomb. And we took out Soleimani. I did that during my first term. Had a huge impact. He was the father of the roadside bomb. And just over the last couple of months with the protests, they've killed at least, it looks like, 32,000 protesters. 32,000 protesters in their own country. They shot them and hung them. We stopped them from hanging a lot of them with the threat of serious violence. But this is some terrible people. They've already developed missiles that can threaten Europe and our bases overseas, and they're working to build missiles that will soon reach the United States of America. After Midnight Hammer, They were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue, starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again, and are at this moment again pursuing their sinister ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen.
So the president speaking there, and this morning we're getting feedback from officials in Iran. All of this ahead of critical talks that are set to take place tomorrow in Geneva over their nuclear program. Leaders there calling the president's remarks big lies. Interesting, just even with the timing here. What do you think about the president's comments there, again, given that we're heading into talks about their nuclear program here within the next 24 hours or so?
Well, the Iranian regime has been in the crosshairs of the Trump administration since the first administration. We saw the cancellation of the nuclear deal that Obama had negotiated, and then the bombing earlier last year. And this is certainly a tense moment. We have a large naval flotilla in the region. More ships seem to keep being sent there. The U.S. is trying to build up the pressure. Last time we saw the Trump administration build up a large naval flotilla off the coast of Venezuela. Ultimately, that was capped by the raid in which the president of the country was captured and taken to New York City for trial. Where will this go? Mm-hmm. Big questions. There was an interesting applause line moment there. One of the moments where Democrats started standing to applaud, to a mix in the Democratic caucus in terms of some people supporting the U.S. taking a kind of tough line on Iran and others remaining in their seats. So I think this is an area where there's an element of bipartisan support for U.S. policy, mixed that a lot of uncertainty about what the best way to proceed is, and uncertainty about just what the Trump administration is planning with this flotilla.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, and also mentioning, what we saw with Maduro as well. That was another scenario where you saw Democrats agreeing that the regime in and of itself was an issue, but disagreeing with how it went about. And so interesting to kind of look at that here. Again, those negotiations set to take place tomorrow, Thursday, and the president has repeatedly said, like he said it in that, he would like to do that through diplomacy, but he's also signaled, that he would consider attacking if those negotiations fall through. So again, I agree with you. We'll see what happens with that. The president also spoke about the SAVE Act, which would have an impact on voting in the country. So let's go ahead and play that for just a little bit, and then we'll talk about the SAVE Act and the president's comments directly following.
And perhaps most importantly, I'm asking you to approve the Save America Act. To stop illegal aliens and others who are unpermitted persons from voting in our sacred American elections. That cheating is rampant in our elections. It's rampant. It's very simple. All voters must show voter ID. voters must show proof of citizenship in order to vote. And no more crooked mail-in ballots except for illness, disability, military, or travel. None. And this should be an easy one. And by the way, it's polling at 89%, including Democrats. 89%. And even the new communist mayor of New York City, I think he's a nice guy, actually. Speak to him a lot. Bad policy, but nice guy. Just said they want.
Okay, the president there pushing the SAVE Act, saying it is one of his priorities to get done, as we've heard him continuously push this narrative that there has been widespread cheating in our elections. However, that simply hasn't been backed up by a lot of evidence there. Dr. Richman, can you do this for me? And for those who may be here, okay, the president is saying the SAVE Act, we need to secure this. Painting the argument here from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, on the SAVE Act and how they are feeling about it at the moment.
Well, so politically, so let's start with the politics. Past the House, Republicans have a narrow majority. They're able to ram it through. Senate, Republicans have a narrow majority, but there's the filibuster. And so we're about to see some theatrics in the Senate. There's talk about trying to force a talking filibuster, try to wear down Democratic opposition. The plain fact of the matter is, unless the filibuster is nuked, there just aren't the votes to get the SAVE Act through the Senate. And so most likely it will fail there. So that's the congressional legislative side. Republicans have been pushing this for some time in various versions, just as Democrats have their own preferred set of election reforms that they've been pushing in various versions for some time. You can sometimes get narrower slices done, but each party has a set of asks that the other party's not willing to accede to, and then they play politics on it. The politics, a bit broader, right? The question of the policy and the impacts. It's about sort of how do you prioritize things. The Republican Party argues, Trump argues, there's substantial fraud that needs to be corralled. And there are some instances. On the other hand, Democrats argue they're not that common, and the collateral damage might be much worse than the benefits. So the argument hangs on, well, if you make everybody show proof of citizenship, there are going to be some citizens who struggle to do that. You raise a barrier to voting. Democrats argue that's a major problem. On the other hand, Republicans come back with, well, but there's some evidence that there are some people who are not citizens who, on occasion, have voted or have registered to vote and so forth. And so how do you prioritize these two things? So that's the fight aimed at the public, right? Within Congress, I don't think anything's going to happen. Aimed at the public, there's this ongoing messaging war. And we saw Trump arguing, how can you oppose this? You must be in favor of vote fraud. Democrats, on the other hand, argue, how could you support this? You must be in favor of disenfranchising people. I think there's a bit of exaggeration to both of those claims. Both sides have reasons for their stances that are, I think, sincerely held, at least.
Well, we know that it's going to be a big thing as we, the timing of everything for sure in getting this changed as we are looking at the midterm election. That's really what everything is building up to. We're seeing it across the country with the states that are now trying to maneuver and change their congressional seats within their particular states, and that's starting at the request of the president. We're seeing it here in Virginia as well. Speaking of Virginia, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to listen to the rebuttal by Democratic Governor, now former Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who spoke on behalf of Democrats last night directly following the president's address. We'll be right back. We are back here on Live Impact News talking about the State of the Union address last night delivered by President Trump. And we now have to talk about the rebuttal that was given by Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger on behalf of Democrats. She was selected to be the person to speak directly following the president's remarks last night. And she painted a very different picture of the state of America last night. And also, as the president says that the economy is doing well, well, she paints a picture blaming him for the state of the economy now. Let's take a listen to a portion of her remarks.
Tonight, as we watched our nation's lawmakers gather for a joint session of Congress, we did not hear the truth from our president. So let's speak plainly and honestly. And let me ask you, the American people watching at home, 3 questions. Is the president working to make life more affordable for you and your family? Is the president working to keep Americans safe both at home and abroad? Is the president working for you? As I campaigned for governor last year, I traveled to every corner of Virginia, and I heard the same pressing concern everywhere. Costs are too high in housing, healthcare, energy, and childcare. And I know these same conversations are being had all across this country. Because since this president took office last year, his reckless trade policies have forced American families to pay more than $1,700 each in tariff costs. Small businesses have suffered, farmers have suffered, some losing entire markets. Everyday Americans are paying the price. And even though the Supreme Court struck these tariffs down 4 days ago, the damage to us, the American people, has already been done. Meanwhile, the president is planning for new tariffs, another massive tax hike on you and your family. And Republicans in Congress, they remain unwilling to assert their constitutional authority to stop him. They're making your life harder. They're making your life more expensive. They're even making it more difficult to see a doctor. Rural health clinics in Virginia and across the country are already closing their doors thanks to the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, championed by the president and Republicans in Congress. And tonight, the president celebrated this law, the one threatening rural hospitals, stripping health care from millions of Americans and driving up costs in energy and housing, all while cutting food programs for hungry kids. But here in Virginia, I am working with our state legislature to lower costs and make the Commonwealth more affordable. And it's not just me. Democrats across the country are laser focused on affordability in our nation's capital and in state capitals and communities across America. In the most innovative and exceptional nation in the history of the world, Americans deserve to know that their leaders are focused on addressing the problems that keep them up at night. Problems that dictate where you live, whether you can afford to start a business or whether you have to skip a prescription in order to buy groceries. So I'll ask again, is the president working to make life more affordable for you and your family? We all know the answer is no. I grew up in a house of service. My mother was a nurse, and my father was a career law enforcement officer. I began my career by following in my father's footsteps as a federal agent, working money laundering and narcotics cases. I worked side by side with local and state police to keep our community safe and to uphold and enforce the law. Law enforcement officers across the country know that it is a unique responsibility to do the serious work of investigating crimes, comforting victims, and making arrests. It's about building trust, and that requires an abiding sense of duty and commitment to community. And yet, our president has sent poorly trained federal agents into our cities, where they have arrested and detained American citizens and people who aspire to be Americans. And they have done it without a warrant. They have ripped nursing mothers away from their babies. They have sent children, a little boy in a blue bunny hat, children to far-off detention centers. And they have killed American citizens in our streets. And they have done it all with their faces masked from accountability. Every minute spent sowing fear is a minute not spent investigating murders, crimes against children, or the criminals defrauding seniors of their life savings. Our president told us tonight that we are safer because these agents arrest mothers and detain children. Think about that. Our broken immigration system is something to be fixed, not an excuse for unaccountable agents to terrorize our communities. After working in law enforcement, I continued my career of service as a CIA officer, working undercover to protect the United States and our allies from global threats, terrorism, nuclear weapons, and the aggression of adversarial nations around the globe. But as the president spoke of his perceived successes tonight, he continues to cede economic power and technological strength to Russia, bow down to China, bow down to a Russian dictator, and make plans for war with Iran. Here's the truth. Over the last year, through DOJ, mass firings, and the appointment of deeply unserious people to our nation's most serious positions, our president has endangered the long and storied history of the United States of America being a force for good. So I'll ask again, is the president working to keep Americans safe, both at home and abroad? We all know the answer is no. In his speech tonight, the president did what he always does. He lied, he scapegoated, and he distracted. And he offered no real solutions to our nation's pressing challenges, so many of which he is actively making worse. He tries to divide us. He tries to enrage us, to pit us against one another, neighbor against neighbor. And sometimes he succeeds. And so you have to ask, who benefits from his rhetoric, his policies, his actions, the short list of laws he's pushed through this Republican Congress? Somebody must be benefiting. He's enriching himself, his family, his friends. The scale of the corruption is unprecedented. There's the cover-up of the Epstein files, the crypto scams, cozying up to foreign princes for airplanes and billionaires for ballrooms, putting his name and face on buildings all over our nation's capital. This is not what our founders envisioned, not by a long shot. So I'll ask again, is the president working for you? We all know the answer is no. But here's the special thing about America. On our 250th anniversary, we know better than any nation what is possible when ordinary citizens, like those who once dreamed right here in this room, reject the unacceptable and demand more of their government. We see it in the determination of students organizing school walkouts all across the country, whose voices are becoming so powerful that the governor of Texas seeks to silence them. We see it in the bravery of Americans in Minnesota standing up for their communities, from peacefully protesting in sub-zero temperatures to carpooling children to school so that their immigrant parents are not ripped away from them in the parking lot. As a mother of 3 school-aged daughters, I am inspired by their bravery, but I am sickened that it is necessary. And Americans across the country are taking action. They are going to the ballot box to reject this chaos. With their votes, they are writing a new story, a more hopeful story. In November, I won my election by 15 points. And we won 13 new seats in our state legislature. Because voters decided they wanted something different. Our campaign earned votes from Democrats, Republicans, independents, and everyone in between. Because they knew as citizens they could demand more, that they could vote for what they believe matters, and that they didn't need to be constrained by a party or political affiliation. This is happening across the country. New Jersey elected Mikey Sherrill as governor in a double-digit victory. Democrats flipped state legislative seats in places like Georgia, Iowa, Mississippi, and Texas. The list goes on and on. Ordinary Americans are stepping up to run in the spirit of our forefathers. They are running to demand more and to do more for their neighbors and communities. I know this story well. I first ran for office in 2018 alongside dozens of other Democrats who did the seemingly impossible, flipping 41 seats in Congress. In my case, I was the first Democrat elected in 50 years, swinging our district 17 points. Those who are stepping up now to run will win in November because Americans, you at home, know you can demand more and that we are working to lower costs. We are working to keep our communities and our country safe, and we are working for you. In his farewell address, George Washington warned us about the possibility of, quote, cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men rising to power. But he also encouraged us, all Americans, to unite in a common cause, to move this nation forward. That is our charge once more, and that is what we are seeing across the country. It is deeply American and patriotic to do so, and it is how we ensure that the state of our union remains strong, not just this year, but for the next 250 years as well, because we, the people, have the power to make change, the power to stand up for what is right, the power to demand more of our nation. May God bless the Commonwealth of Virginia, and may God bless the United States of America.
Okay, that was the rebuttal by Democratic Governor Abigail Spanberger here in Virginia. She shot that there in Williamsburg last night after the President's State of the Union address. Again, we have Dr. Jesse Richman here from Old Dominion University, political expert, talking with us this morning. What was your thoughts on the governor's speech last night, tone, what she said, particularly coming off of the heels of what the president had to say?
It was a classic Spanberger speech in terms of very poised delivery on the whole, somewhat unflappable delivery. She had one little tiny stumble where she said Russia when she meant to say China, but on the whole, she delivered the speech she intended to deliver. People in this position, right, you're doing the response to the State of the Union, are always in it's a challenging speech to give, I think, because you're coming out of, in this case, almost 2 hours of the president talking. You had to write your speech probably before that, so you're not able to kind of customize. Right? Had she been able to customize, maybe she would have say, well, the president talked about how the price of beef's coming down a little bit, but it only came down last month and it's still up, 13% from a year, right? You don't necessarily have the time to sort of develop your speech to dynamically respond, but you are responding. And for Spanberger, part of the task was to introduce herself to a nationwide audience who may or may not really know who she is. and part of the task was to deliver the Democratic message. And so you're sort of split between those tasks, those roles also. She argued that Trump's wrong about affordability getting better under his administration. I thought having some statistics or some numbers there would have probably been useful for her. She just went on sort of the impression she got from Virginians while campaigning. Having more concrete things there probably would have been stronger. The state of the economy, similar kind of story. I think a little bit more in the specifics might have been valuable for her on a number of these points. There's the risk for both sides that people live in a particular political bubble. You think that a set of facts are agreed upon in the broader country when they're not, and so you have to engage in a way that pushes your set of facts as well as your interpretations based on the facts you think are agreed on but really aren't necessarily.
Something that kind of stood out to me when I was watching and thinking about the president's speech and her speech on the topic of affordability. We talked earlier about how President Trump really is painting this rosy picture. As you said, he wants to bring that positive spin to where we are economically, even though voters and polling suggest that people don't feel that way.
Yep.
Whereas for Spanberger, she was tapping into the feel that she got from people along the campaign. And I just sat there and I thought about it. We saw that similarly from President Trump when he was campaigning.
Absolutely.
About the feel of how things are going. I'm going to do this on my first day for grocery prices because I know you guys are feeling this, et cetera, all these things. So it's interesting to see that kind of cat and mouse being played between the two parties, but in particular in this case, looking at President Trump and seeing how it's changed now that he wields all the, so to speak, power with the Republicans owning the House, the Senate, and the White House. And
he owns the public's continuing dissatisfaction with the economy, right? And I think that's exactly spot on. Turn and turn about here is fair play, I suppose, in terms of each party exploiting vibes that may or may not be totally founded in the numbers when that is working their way, or trying to cite particular numbers that look better than the public general feeling seems to be to try to play the narrative a different way.
Really quick, last thoughts here. Again, thank you so much, Dr. Jesse Richman here from Old Dominion University, speaking with us now on this. Last thoughts from you. All of this leading up to the midterms. That's really what we're building up to. Sure. Do you think that last night helped either party more in their quest to kind of gain more seats come later this year?
I think we'll see a little bit of a bump for Trump. The administration has in part suffered from the throwing everything against the wall all the time, shock and awe approach to politics that they've often taken this last year, where even their supporters are somewhat at a loss to know what the narrative is. He ignored various issues that haven't gone terribly well for him. Greenland, for example, didn't get any mention, and so forth. And he framed his argument for why things are actually going well in the country. And I think that will maybe help draw a few of the Republicans who've been beginning to get soft on their support for the president back into the fold a little bit. So I think there's a small increment boost for Trump, specifically from that segment. At the same time, I don't see this changing the broad dynamics of the campaign for the midterms, which I think remain very much more in the Democratic Party's favor than the Republican Party's favor.
Yeah, you say that. I took note of that as well. Greenland, the Epstein case, what happened in Minneapolis, those things we did not hear about. But the greatest hits from the president that he has continuously hit on: economy, immigration, and election security. We heard about plenty last night. Dr. Jesse Richman, thank you so much. You spent an hour with us this morning breaking that down. We appreciate you so much for doing so. We'll take another break here, and we'll come right back here for Live Impact News.